Okay, so we're going to pick the story up of European exploration where we left off with the Portuguese. So we're going to keep going with European exploration. And we're going to continue the story where we left off with Portugal kind of probing the coast of Africa to find a route to go to the east. So Portugal is looking for a route to India via the sea because they knew generally where India was, but they didn't know the route to India through the water. So they knew how to get there on land, but they didn't know how to get there through sea. So as they go, and I'll bring up a map of Africa here, you can kind of see the route they take because a lot of these port cities along the coast of Africa are named after they're Portuguese. They're Portuguese names. Like Porto Novo in Portuguese means new port. So you can kind of see what the Portuguese are doing. They're looking for a route to India via the sea, and they're just kind of slowly probing the African coast, looking for a route to the east, but also setting up trading posts on the African coast. So they're setting up their own trade posts along the African coast, and these you might call emporia. You might call them entrepot, or I've also seen this one, feitoria. They all mean the same thing. They're all essentially trading posts, I think in different languages, but they all basically mean the same thing. They're trading posts. And so at these trading posts, like an emporia or an entrepot or a feitoria, these were like free trade zones where lots of trade goods, lots of commodities were bought and sold. And so the more of these trading posts the Portuguese set up, the more stuff gets sent back to Lisbon, which is the capital of Portugal. So the more they set up these trading posts, the more stuff that they can trade. Now, it may not be all the stuff they're looking for, but at this point, the Portuguese are just happy to get additional trade goods. This probing was also kind of to see how far Islamic influence extended into Africa, or maybe another way, away from the Middle East. So how far is Islamic influence extended beyond the base they know about? And so Portugal is also kind of gathering intelligence on the Muslims, economic intelligence to kind of take advantage of their, the edges of their economic territory. And remember, one of the big goals of all of this exploration was to either cut into Islamic trade or to replace the Islamic middlemen with European middlemen. And so this was kind of an important goal in and of itself, to kind of see where the Europeans may be able to cut themselves in. Kind of a interesting side note with this, there was this myth of a powerful Christian king, and his name was Prester John. And the hope was that this guy they hoped that this guy was hoped to join the Europeans against the Muslims. And it was theorized that Prester John lived somewhere in Africa, but they didn't know where. Of course, Prester John is not real. This may have been connected to stories about Ethiopia, which was an African kingdom that was Christian. And it would have been maybe a little bit more removed from the Europeans, seeing as Ethiopia is here. And so it might be a place that the Europeans may not know that much about. But in any event, this Prester John guy was mythological, and of course they never found him. But that was another part of this, was that they were trying to find this guy who might help them against the Muslims. Now, eventually, all of the Portuguese stuff paid off, and in 1488, a Portuguese sailor named Bartholomew Diaz sailed into the Indian Ocean. And he was the first European to do that. So in 1488, Bartholomew Diaz sailed into the Indian Ocean. He was the first European to do it, but his crew mutinied and he was forced to go home pretty much as soon as he did. So he was forced home by his crew. You know, it makes sense. They were scared. They were in completely uncharted territory, and they were scared. They didn't, they weren't sure what they were going to face in the Indian Ocean, and so they forced Diaz to go back home. Of course, the ironic thing is that the Indian Ocean trade network was, for the most part, entirely peaceful. That is, until the Portuguese showed up and messed it all up. But Diaz figured out where the Indian Ocean was, but had to go home pretty much soon afterwards. It wasn't until 1497 when another Portuguese sailor, Vasco da Gama, finally makes it to India. So he finally arrives in India, and the legend of Vasco da Gama is he docks in India and demands gold and Christians kind of fulfilling all three triple G achievements at once. He's rich, he wants to spread Christianity, and of course he's the first guy to get there, so triple G achieved. So he did it, he achieved the triple G. He didn't find gold or Christians in India, but he does return with several ships full of exotic spices and became really rich. And all of his sailors did too. So he's really rich. This paid for his voyage several times over. So he gets rich, he gets famous. Didn't find any Christians, but at least he could say that he looked for them. Now, by kind of wrap up the Portuguese story, by the middle of the 16th century, so about 50 years after this, the Portuguese had emporia. I'm just going to call them emporia. Any of those other words will work too, though. They had emporia along the African coast, the Indian coast, along the island of Madagascar, Indonesia, and even as far away as Macau and the coast of China. So the Portuguese really explored the Indian Ocean and into the Pacific Ocean. It's no wonder that the Portuguese didn't create a real physical empire, but they kind of created an economic empire that's known as a trading post empire. And all of this stuff is bringing back to Portugal all sorts of exotic trade goods, gold, all sorts of spices like pepper and nutmeg, gold, or I already said gold, ivory, exotic hardwoods, and of course slaves, but we'll talk more about slaves in a later video. But all of this stuff is being funneled into Portugal. And it starts with Da Gama, but after Da Gama figures out how to get to India, all of this stuff starts flowing into Portugal really quickly. So that's the Portuguese side of the story, but there's another side to the story that we need to tell, and that's the Spanish side. So while all of this stuff with Portugal is going on, Spain, so Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, they're watching Portugal get richer and richer. And, of course, Spain and Portugal are very close rivals. Like, they're right next door to each other. Spain is bigger, but Portugal seems to have figured out a way to make a lot of money. And Spain can't have that. Spain can't let Portugal get ahead of them. especially in terms of money. So this makes Ferdinand and Isabella nervous. Additionally, they want to continue spreading Christianity after the Reconquista, which was concluded in 1492. So that date is conspicuous for a couple of reasons. One, because that's where the Reconquista ended, but it's also when they sent Columbus, and it's not a coincidence. So they finish with the Reconquista, they encounter Columbus, who wants to go try to find India himself, and all of this stuff is kind of coming to a head in 1492. They're nervous about what Portugal has done. They've already found the Indian Ocean. It's just a matter of time until they get to India. They've reconquered all of Spain, all of the Iberian Peninsula, and they're itching to continue to spread Christianity. So they're itching to spread Christianity, and they're looking for new trade routes. And then in 1492, this eccentric sailor comes to visit them with a proposition. So all of this stuff kind of comes to a head when Christopher Columbus, of course his name was not Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus is the anglicized version of his name. His real name was Cristoforo Colon because he was Italian. He was from the Italian city-state of Genoa. We know him as Christopher Columbus because Americans wanted to have a hero that they could look back on who was not British. And so they found Columbus, or Cologne, and named him Christopher Columbus to make him sound more American. So that's why he's called Christopher Columbus. So let's talk for a second about Columbus. So let's talk about what Columbus was trying to do. So the myth is that Columbus wanted to prove the earth was round. That is a myth. All sailors knew the earth was round. And they had known this for centuries. The Greeks proved this. The Greeks proved this almost 2,000 years prior. And thanks to the Renaissance, all of this Greek math was coming back to Europe, and of course everyone knew that the earth was round. What he did want to prove, though, here's the truth, he did want to prove that the earth was smaller than previously thought. That's what he wanted to prove. He had calculated that the Earth was probably about 2/3 the size of what people thought it was. He was wrong, by the way. The Greek scientists that had theorized the size of the Earth were more or less right. But Columbus wanted to prove that the Earth was smaller than previously thought. He was wrong about that. But he comes to Ferdinand and Isabella with a proposition that, if he sails west from Spain, he will reach India faster than the Portuguese will if they go all the way around Africa. And what he wants to prove is that it's faster to go west than east. Because if it is, that means he's right. So Ferdinand and Isabella say, they approve, and they give him like the bare minimum to try out his theory. I mean, they give him 3 pretty small ships. Ferdinand and Isabella have really nothing to lose. Like, if he's right and he can get to Spain faster, get to India faster by going west, they've made a very small investment with a very big payoff. If he's wrong, they're out this very small investment. Like, they assume he's not going to come back with these ships. But Columbus wants to test out his theory. Is he right? Is it actually faster to go west? It might have actually been had he known about the existence of North and South America, but that's neither here nor there. So they give him these 3 small ships. He sets out in August of 1492 and arrives in the Bahamas in October, so October 12th, 1492, otherwise known as Columbus Day. Again, we have Columbus Day in order to make Americans feel good about a non-British hero. Franklin Roosevelt actually made this a federal holiday to try to court Italian voters. So Franklin Roosevelt made Columbus Day a holiday to celebrate Italians so that they would vote for him. So that's why he's called Christopher Columbus, because we were looking for a non-British hero that Americans could look up to. And we celebrate Columbus Day because we wanted to have an Italian American to vote for Franklin Roosevelt. Now, just on a side note, Columbus Day is increasingly becoming replaced by Indigenous Peoples Day, mostly to make up for the fact that Columbus is about to commit genocide. So he arrives in the Bahamas, and pretty quickly, so he quickly subdues and kills a lot of the Native Americans he finds. He's looking for gold and spices because he thinks he's in India. None of the people he's on the boats with have ever been to India, so they don't really know what it's supposed to look like. But you could probably make a pretty good guess that he's not in India, because what they're seeing sounds nothing like the stories people have told about India. But he holds on to the fact that he's in India, and in fact, he never actually admits that he never made it to India. He, for the rest of his life, tells people he made it to India, even though it was pretty clear that he was not in India. So we will pick the story up of the Columbian exchange and all of that in a later video. But right now, the point is that Spain has now discovered a bunch of new territory. And we'll talk more about that in a later video. There's one more point I want to make here quickly, and that's Spain and Portugal have a new venue for conflict now. So not only can they be rivals in Europe, but now they can be rivals in North and South America. They can now be rivals in India. And so we're on the verge of essentially a world war between Spain and Portugal. So to step in and prevent a conflict, the Pope forces Spain and Portugal to sign a treaty that divides the world. So Spain gets the western part, and Portugal gets all the new stuff they find in the east. And the line basically goes through, so if I draw out South America, that's the line. So the line goes through what is now Brazil. So everything on this side of the line, all the new stuff is Portuguese. On this side of the line, everything is Spanish. And this treaty is known as the Treaty of Tordesillas. It was signed in 1493, and it's an example of new rivalries springing up as a result of exploration. So this is an old rivalry, but it's being seen in a new way because of exploration. They can be rivals now, not only in Europe, but now in India, in the Western Hemisphere, anywhere on the oceans. And this treaty was meant to prevent those kinds of conflicts from springing up. It doesn't work. There's going to be lots of conflicts that spring up as a result of exploration, but we'll worry about all of that stuff in another video. And I'm going to stop there. So until our next video, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.